Well, this is a book about which is the first book to actually pull together all the information that we have about what happened in Wuhan, um, why it happened in Wuhan, and what the consequences will be for China, for China's relations with the outside world, for the future of the biotechnology industry, and what it tells you about Western engagement with China, which has been the um, a critical key policy which has shaped the world over the last 40 years. So this book really explains why the COVID-19 global disaster is largely the fault of China, but it's also a reflection of the mistakes we have done in our engagement with China. Yeah, because this is a technology which has gone through a dramatic change. Things which used to cost, processes which used to cost billions of dollars can now be done for thousands or hundreds of dollars. So you can alter, cut and paste genes on microbes, on plants, seeds, animals, and people, and change them in a way which is people 10 or 15 years ago could only dream about, and that has many consequences. Well, I think we're at a crossroads with our relations with China. We've already seen a great many difficulties over Huawei and China's ambitions to control 5G technology. So, as everyone knows, China has many countries in the Western world have banned Huawei and have shunned many of the industries in um, in this high tech communication sector, from the chips to the software, and so now we've got a case where China hasn't really been forthcoming about the origins of this virus. There are a lot of grounds for suspecting that this is a man-made disaster which China is at fault, and therefore we cannot carry on with our relations with China as before, because China isn't really going to allow us to go into China and investigate what's happening in these labs. And so a lot of academic contacts with China, I think, are going to be curtailed. A lot of investment going into China's biotech industry is going to be curtailed. And around the world, there are going to have to be many more restrictions on the biotechnology industry, which is going to slow it down. And that's going to cause a problem, because if you can't trust China, you can't sort of handicap your own industry and allow China to carry on doing reckless, uncontrolled experiments in the way that it has done before. And that's something I talk about in more detail in the book. Well, yes, I lived in China and reported from China for 18 years. And government under Xi Jinping over the last, nearly a decade now, has taken a lot of steps, not only to which are damaging for its relations with the outside world, but also, I think, for its relationship with its own population. So it has dramatically stepped up the control of history, it's restricted the freedom of speech. It's persecuted all kinds of people to make them conform. And that includes many ethnic minorities, Uyghurs and Tibetans. But they've also attacked a lot of Christians and Muslims and people of different faiths in China. So I think they've widened the gap between the party and the population. And so if you take the majority Han population, you have another case where a lot of people in China suspect that the government hasn't been telling them the truth about this virus and its origins. So I believe that people, and I explain in the book how people tried to report what was really going on in Wuhan, and were arrested and threatened, and people were sacked, and so if you have something this big, you're going to create the feeling that the Chinese Communist Party is actually out of control. There are no checks and balances on what it does. And it could easily, the next time it could be a nuclear power station that blows up. So this is really a kind of Chernobyl situation where at some point you're sort of creating this permanent state of surveillance and fear and oppression in China. And it would only take some kind of economic crisis or international crisis for this to unravel. And I can't believe that there aren't a large faction in the Communist Party who are quite unhappy with the leadership of Xi Jinping. Yes, I think this is really quite explosive. Because everyone had assumed since 1980 that if we engage with China, if we welcome Chinese students, if we traded with China, if there was mutual investment, that would increase the level of trust between China and the outside world. And as China got richer and more confident, it would liberalize. So it clearly hasn't liberalized. And actually, when you look at what China has been saying to people in China, it is actually trying to blame the foreigners for this disease, which came out of China, because they're saying it's nothing to do with us. It was imported on packets of frozen salmon, and we are not at fault, and we have avoided the consequences. And in many respects, China has done its best to take advantage of the crisis in the West through things like its shipping policy, its purchase of all the medical equipment before the outbreak got going, and by really treating the World Health Organization with a kind of contempt. And so what will be the consequences for this? That there are a lot of already many people saying that we have to regard China not with benevolence, but as a competitor, and a dangerous competitor who is trying to destabilize the post-war international order and to reshape it entirely to its own advantages. So what you are seeing is actually the creation of an anti-Chinese alliance around the world, where a number of major countries are banding together to develop a policy to counter China's influence. I've been commissioned to write another book, which will particularly concentrate on how China has changed Britain. So the influence China has had on the United Kingdom, just looking at things like industry, trade, education, and Britain's standing in the world. And really what you were looking at is an example of China's opportunities, the way the UK has benefited from China's enormous economic growth, and the consequences which we're going to see as attitudes towards China change from this rather positive and slightly condescending attitude to one in which we're rather scared of China and are sitting around thinking, how are we going to counter this malevolent influence on international affairs? So for instance, the Navy, the Royal Navy has just sent a fleet into the South China Sea. It's also sent a fleet into the Black Sea, because people are worried about this alliance between China and Russia. They're worried about the freedom of the seas. They're worried about global freedom of speech and communications. And and they're also worried about the enormous distortions that the growth of China has introduced to the global trading system, because a lot of people feel that China has been manipulating this and unfairly taking advantage of it. So people have moved really within 5 years from a sort of golden era of relations with China to a much more hostile and suspicious relationship, which is being compared with a new kind of Cold War, which is kind of one way of putting at it. But what I would explain in the book is that you can't really compare this with the Cold War, because there were actually a lot of hot wars during the Cold War. They were in East Asia, not in Europe. But nevertheless, you were dealing with an enemy with which you had very minimal contact and very minimal trading relations. But China is a major trading partner of the UK, and many people in the British government want to see Britain take advantage of the global trading opportunities in China. And secondly, they want China's cooperation. They must have China's cooperation if they are to tackle the global warming crisis. So obviously, we only consume 1% of the world's coal, but China is responsible for 27%. So if you don't get China on board, then you're not really going anywhere with this.